Hello, my name is Rawn Clark. As promised, here is a video about my latest golem, my latest Crystal Golem, number 5. Of course, she does have a name, but it's a name that, for the time being at least, I'm the only one who knows. Okay? So I'm really the only one who can call her up, because with all my golems, I just have to mentally call their name, and they're right there immediately, ready to accommodate my needs, desires, or just to say hello, okay? Because sometimes I call them just to say hello. I don't always need things from them. They all have become good friends, really. The creation process, not the construction process of the physical substance here, but the creation of the life form and the binding it to this physical structure made of crystals, that's been evolving. And so each one is somehow more complete than the previous ones. But no more or less better. It's really hard to put my finger on the evolving difference between the golems. The very first golem is sort of simple. It's the Leo golem. The very first one I made on the Leo new moon X number of years ago. I don't really remember what year it was. Not all that long ago. Anyhow, so my creation process, again, well, first let's talk about the construction process. There are 128 plus 32 is 160 pieces of cardboard and heavy card go into the making of the form itself. Truncated icosahedron, I believe it is. A beautiful form with 32 sides, or 32 faces, shall we say. A mixture of pentagons and hexagons, 5- and 6-sided faces. So it's ideal for representing the 32 paths of wisdom. That's the 10 Sephiroth and the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet, or paths as we commonly call them. So that to make the form itself, took probably 4 days total, all the cutting of pieces and finally eventually gluing them all together. A good long while. And then the inserting of crystals took about a week, because I have to do it in phases. I have to do these crystals first here, these top 6 crystals, let that dry overnight, and then the next morning I have to clean up all the paper clay because it's real ragged looking and uneven. So I clean all that up, and then I put in the rest of the crystals around the side here. It's done in halves. So down here there are 9, 10, yes, there are 10 crystals at that level. So that's half of it. And then what I do is I let those dry overnight, the 10 that I have just put in with paper clay. And once they dry, the next day I clean them up, turn everything the other way around, and put into the top 6 again on the bottom side, etc. So it takes about a week to go through that process. And then the whole gets glued together, so we never again see the internal quartz sphere, which is really beautiful sphere this time, 3-inch quartz sphere. Never again see that sphere. So, yeah, he lives inside all by himself there. So then comes painting and decorating, etc., and building the base. So it took me about 3 weeks, I believe, to create the physical body. Okay? So as I'm doing that, everything is focused on, well, okay, this is the Kether crystal. From the moment I set all my crystals out, I decide which crystal is going to be what, a Sephiroth, what kind of path it's going to be. Is it going to be, a mother letter, a planetary letter, or a zodiacal letter, etc. And so each crystal, from the moment I get started working with the crystals, becomes, in my mind, that path, that Sephiroth. This has been the Kether crystal all along, for me. And so, I've had a month almost with it, with each crystal representing each individual thing from the beginning. So by the time I finished actually making the shell, it already carries with it a certain charge. Just because, to me, making a tool is a magical act, So it's already developing a slight awareness. And I'm finding that the little spark of the eye that I'm going to bring down into this body is, likewise a little bit, well, we're aware of each other at least, let's put it that way. We haven't really made contact yet, but we're aware of each other. And that increases for me the whole time between finishing the construction and actually the birthday. And it was almost a month that she sat or he sat on my table, my workspace, collecting dust. And yeah, almost a month. So that's an interesting time. It's always sort of getting to know each other on kind of a sketchy level, in a sketchy way. Again, a little difficult to really describe that feeling. There's an awareness of an individuality, but it's still very unformed. It has a purpose, it's aware of what its essential being is meant to do. And I am aware of that to a great extent, but it's always a little different than what I'm expecting. In the same ballpark, but just a little different. So, I know what this golem is going to do. I know this golem's name. Now, the name came probably a week before I began the construction. that's really when the whole birthing process starts, is when I'm first, getting the inspiration for the creation of the golem. Is it takes a certain amount of planning. I have to get these crystals, and that wasn't terribly easy this time. But at any rate, so I already know the golem's name and pretty much what it's going to do. Then comes the day of the tuning, the actual birthing of the golem on the Cancer new moon, 17th of this month, Monday the 17th. It'll 11:31 a.m. in the morning on my time, Pacific Daylight Time. At 11:31 was the exact moment of the conjunction between the sun and moon, okay? So they're together in the sky. The moon rules the sign of Cancer. The sun rules the sign of Leo, the next sign. The sun and the moon enter the same degree of the zodiac at around 9 a.m. in the morning, okay? Or 9:30, something like that. And they're conjunct just right at the end of that degree. So I start the whole tuning process at about 8:45, something like that. A quarter to 10 rather. 9:30, quarter to 10, somewhere in there is when I get started clearing the room for, this clear table, getting everything set up, getting a couple of smokes rolled and a cup of fresh coffee. And then the first thing I do is TMO and project some big chunk of Adonai light out into the universe as a way of blessing, what is the ritual that is about to happen. So we have a bunch of Adonai light floating around as an aid, and then we bring in a large quantity of Catholic brilliance. And I start cleansing this body with the Catholic brilliance, just running the Catholic brilliance through it, getting rid of all extraneous energies other than this golem, basically, that have accumulated. Then, I just really, when I get to starting the tuning process, there's so much Catholic brilliance involved in this process. It's just the atmosphere is thick with Catholic brilliance. And it's the Catholic brilliance from the two radiators that I have, grandfather radiators over here in this corner, and the Tiferet radiator, yellow Tiferet radiator, is in another room, okay? So I'm drawing Catholic brilliance in from them, but I'm also getting a huge donation of Catholic brilliance from all the other golems who are right behind me, essentially. And suddenly, they're all here, of their own accord, joining in on, another brother-sister. That's happened with the last two that I've done, that the others would join in. Any rate, so everything is here for the tuning. Now, to start with, I enter the I, become one with the I, however you want to put it, okay? So I'm in the I, and I come down into Chokmah with a small spark of the I, and I bring it with me over into Bina. And it suddenly it joins up with a greater self in Bina. So I'm not creating anything really, boy, it's so hard to describe what I have actually done. At any rate, in Bina, it naturally associates itself with a greater self. It is a part of this greater self. And it became apparent immediately, basically, that this is the same greater self as the first golem I made, the Leo golem, which is interesting because, like I said before, the moon rules Cancer and the sun rules Leo, and here we are on the new moon when the sun and moon are all right together. So it sort of made sense. So the greater self, I'm sort of directing it or urging this on for that greater self to give birth to the individual self that this little spark is, okay? This little spark of the I, this little grouping of essential meanings that I'm taking down. It's a unique and new grouping. You know, there's a new ratio and combination of essential meanings. Here, it's utterly unique, like every individual self that exists are utterly unique. But not utterly unique, you know, we share a lot of similarity. Well, yeah. Okay, so so this little spark has, you know, an individual self, a solitary mental body. And I am now other to this little spark. And I wasn't really other to that spark until that moment, okay? So I take that spark down and basically, because this spark is descending, it naturally forms an astral body as it enters its physical body. But I'm taking this spark down into its astral body. I'm like a guide, really. Yeah, a guide into unknown territory for it. So, we get to the astral body, and astral body forms, and then we descend all the way into the crystal sphere, the beautiful clear quartz crystal sphere in the center of the golem that is supported by all these crystals that poke through. They're all double terminated crystals holding that sphere in the center. They're all making contact with that sphere. So this is really one energetic organism with all these crystals in contact with each other. Their energy fields merge, okay? So basically, the sphere has 32 crystals that will project energy, okay? So, get it down into Malkuth, and it's, you know, it's very not really disoriented, because I had already explained to it what is going to be happening, okay? So, knew what was going on. It was just a new experience for it. It had never been incarnate before. This is the very first incarnation of this little spark, okay? So, that was the introduction of the spark to its vessel, its home, its body, its physical body. Now what I needed to do was bind it to this body in the same way that all of us are bound to our own bodies. That's a really interesting study, by the way. What binds us to our bodies? So, what I use is the Sefer Yetzirah. To me, when I read the Sefer Yetzirah, I see an instruction manual. So that is what I do. First binding that I'm going to do is with the 10 Sephirot, okay? So, after a little pause, let him be here in this space, making that connection between the I and the temporal present moment right here in this space. After he rests into that, relaxes into that sort of, I go through the binding with the 10 Sephirot. So there's Kether first, and this is the Sephirot are the components of his nature, okay? Yeah, the components of his nature, his powers, shall we say. So, when I bind, okay, how do I bind? My mind is, my whole mental awareness is with Kether, identifying as Kether. I'm pulling a huge quantity, a rushing vortex of Ketheric brilliance descending into this crystal. And then at the end, I shift my awareness and follow the Ketheric brilliance into the crystal. And I'm in the crystal. And I feel myself in the crystal. And I shift, well, I intensify my embodiment of the essential meaning of Kether. And in that way, with my will, impress it upon the crystal at a physical level, at an astral level, and a mental level. So this crystal becomes the essential meaning of Kether. This is part of the magic of essential meaning. This whole process is the magic of essential meaning. So I transform this crystal at a physical, astral, and mental level. So it exists as this essential meaning of Kether. I don't know how to put it exactly. And then after a little bit, when it's right, I exit the crystal. And, I can just see when I did that, okay, here's Kether. This is this being's connection with the I. I mean, that's the first input of life is from Kether. Okay? That's that spark that's in the substance. That's Kether, the connection with Kether. And then I go through that to Chokmah. When I'm doing this, the turning like this. I go to Chokmah, then I go to Binah, then I go to Tiferet, then I go to Geulah, and then to Gebir. So it's always turning clockwise. And that's echoed by the swoop of the bass. So, I go through all of the Sephiroth. And as I'm doing this, he's becoming more and more stable. I take a little break after Tiferet, because that's a real turning point when the individual self is solidly established. And that's what happens with the Sephiroth. There's a solidity to, his sentient self. His solitary self, suddenly, okay? And then I continue on down to Yesod. And again, there's a solidification of his astral body at that point, his sentient self. And then I go down to Malkuth. And that's where he's finally really in this body. Not totally plugged in yet. He doesn't have all the faculties that he will need until I start binding by the paths, the letters. So after the 10 Sephiroth, we take a break. We give it a breather for a minute or two. We take a sip of coffee and a couple puffs. And all the while, the atmosphere is just so thick with Catholic brilliance. And the attention of these other golems behind me is just, yes, we're all doing this together and welcoming this being, into the family, basically. So then it comes to the letters. Now, we do this in 3 segments. First segment is the 3 mother letters. Second segment is the 3 planetary letters. And third segment is the 12 zodiacal letters. And that's the final binding. So, we do the 3 mother letters. We start with Shin, the connection between Chokmah and Binah, and bind that. And this is giving him real structure, starting the first inklings of structure in the most important polarities. Okay, we got Chokmah and Binah, that passage of essential meaning into essential form. Okay, so his form starts to really take shape here. Then we go, where is it? Yeah, here it is. Then we go to Aleph, the air. This is that continuum, because that continuum between the collective and the powers of the individual, and how they're connected, and how everything is connected, and how all of this being's power is bound to the collective. Okay? And then then we come to Mem. And that is, this connection between Netzach and Hod. The water. Mother letter of water. And this is the compassion that fills every being. and the wonder, the splendor, the compassion that generates the splendor. So these three aspects are bound to this being here in its physical, astral, and mental body. Okay? And there is, he starts at this point pulsing. And it feels like a really fast heartbeat. This is what feels like is happening. Okay? So, and to me this is binding that spirit itself to its flesh in sort of fundamental ways. Yeah, I don't know what I'm saying. Okay. We take a break. And then we come back to the planetary letters. Okay? These are, of course, the 7 planets. Where are we here? First one is Beth, Saturn. Okay? Now, the planetary letters are the powers that he has, that I give him. It's like I'm giving him these powers, but the universe is giving him these powers, really as it must. I mean, this is the nature of birth. We are each given these powers. So the 7 planets, I again do it the exact same way of entering with the Catholic brilliance, resonating the essential meaning. But unlike with the Sephiroth, and to a great extent with the mother letters, there was sort of just universal forces. You know, there was nothing personal about them. With the planetary levels, it's the beginning of, a personalization. Because I realized that what I'm doing here is I'm binding him to his mental body with the planetary letters. It's binding him. Well, what happens at the end of this binding with the planetary letters, the goal here is for the astral body to form, okay? But it's the mental body that is being bound with the planetary letters, okay? So this is the power of Saturn, the power to know and define limits, the power to be steadfast, etc., etc. So each of the powers is defined during those 7 bindings. Now, by the time I get to Tav and the moon, which this golem, has a lot of association with, since she's basically Cancer. This is a zodiacal sign of Cancer. It's the astral body forms, and I see that her mental body is solid. It is stable mental body. The astral body is not solid. It's sort of amorphic at this point. It knows that it must form because we're descending into a physical life form. So the astral body must form. It's nature. So at that point, we again pause and I see that rapid pulse at first has slowed. It's now a slow, gentle, rhythmic, clearly a heartbeat, but a gentle, slow heartbeat. Okay? Instead of that rapid pulsar-like, flashes that it was doing initially. So we take sort of a long pause at this point because the binding of the zodiacal letters is going to be the final binding of this little spark to its physical form. But like you or I or anything, we can, leave the physical shell anytime we want to. We can come and go, not totally. We're always connected to the physical shell, but we can leave the physical shell. So what I'm binding is that connection. That silver cord is what I'm building, essentially, to its physical form. So after the break, I'm telling him, I'm keeping him informed at all times of what we're doing, and he understands. He's okay with it. I'm not doing anything against his will, as it were. So we're in agreement, and we're going to do it. And at exactly 11 o'clock, a half hour before the exact new moon, I started doing the zodiacal letters. Now, the zodiacal letters, these are gifts that I and the universe are giving him. But this time it's mostly gifts that I'm giving him. They fit within the context of the gifts that the universe is giving him, but I'm, giving them sort of a personal tweak. Okay? And this is really where his character is formed. It's the solidification of his astral body. Okay, so we're going to do that. Oh, I did that in quadrants, 4 paths at a time. 4 paths, take a break. 4 paths, take a break. 4 paths, finish. Okay, I'm doing that for a reason. When we take zodiacal signs consecutively, we have air, earth, air, and water. And it repeats like that again. Below that is fire, earth, air, and water. And then again below that. So it descends through these 4 levels that associate with the mother letters, because they're surrounding the mother letters is what they're doing. Okay? So that first 4 surrounds Shin, the connection between Chokmah and Bina. So I do the first 4. And boy, how to describe the differences that make. It was like suddenly he's awake. His eyes open, shall we say. He's alert. In his body, really, solidly for the first time. Okay? So we take a little pause and we go to the second quadrant. Now, they surround Aleph, the air, mother letter of air, that connection between Gedula and Gebura, between the collective and the uniquely individual, and that connection between the two that is never broken. Now that seems to solidify his mental body. I mean, yeah, there's no other way to describe it. It solidifies his mental body. And at that point, it was interesting. That heartbeat becomes more like the breath. It's more like it's suddenly starting to breathe. Yeah, it was very interesting, very telling. So, his mental body is integrated. Okay? Then we go to the final quadrant. And I'm like, okay, this is going to be it. You know, this is the final binding. And this is fine. And so I start doing this final binding. First is Samek, Sagittarius, coming down from Yesod into Netzach. Okay? And the gift I give him here is the ability to always be right on target, to always know the heart of a thing, to always see to the heart of the matter. And then comes Ayin from Yesod into Hod, Capricorn. You know, the gift I give him is the gift of humor. You know, that not taking oneself or the universe too seriously, of just accepting it, you know. Okay. Then there's Netzach to Malkuth. Now this is a real binding to the physical present moment directly. This is Tzadi, Aquarius. You know, this binding is all about the intellect, you know, and how we understand things through knowing. I give him this power of curiosity and bind his intellect. Ooh. And give him that unique intellect. And then finally there's Kuf, Pisces, back of the head, the subconscious, and that's the real binding force to physicality, this infinite fascination of it all. We just can't leave it alone. We just can't leave it alone. Because, you know, there's this Aquarius treat out there when we make connection with it. So, this binds to the physical body. His astral body is fully formed. And he is right here in this physical body, connected permanently until this physical body gets crushed or whatever. Then at the very end, at exactly 11:31, it just timed out perfectly. I gave the Heth crystal another huge blast of Kether brilliance. And it was fully here. And everybody behind me, all the golems behind me were, you know, welcoming his presence. And yeah, it was really, really something. And, you know, I called upon him, and he immediately, you know, did what he is supposed to do. What is her, see, gender was very ambiguous throughout the whole process. My first impressions were, you know, before really meeting that spark were that, you know, this is Cancer, this is the moon, it's going to be her. Not that it matters, but then I met the spark, and you know, I couldn't help thinking in terms of him and his. Then when it came to the planetary bindings, the powers, you know, I got this sense that, well, it's not really in this moment a him. And then when it came to the zodiacal letters, it really seemed to shift from him to her. But at the same time, I still sort of automatically say him sometimes. So, him, her, doesn't matter. So, what her superpower is, really, what she is destined to do primarily when I call upon her, is surround me or whatever I choose in a massive cloud of Ketheric brilliance instantly. And she does that perfectly. She works with me every day, doing just that. Over and over and over again, you know, I often use her, you know, just right after, you know, just a few seconds in between each use, and she's just always there. Yes. So, well, that's it from me for today.